Hey guys, welcome back to the album review space here on the Dominator Axle YouTube channel. Today we are going to be reviewing ERRA's Drift, which came out about a week ago. I believe it was on the 16th that it got released. I've been going crazy over this album. I have literally listened to it at least 8 times over in completion. So we're going to go ahead and dig in and see what kind of stuff we want to pull out of it. Drift is ERRA's first full-length record, released on Sumerian Records. Previously, they released an EP called Moments of Clarity, a little 5-track EP with a different vocalist. ERRA is typically considered a progressive metalcore band from Birmingham, Alabama. They started back in the late 2000s. In the late 2000s. ERRA's had quite a tumultuous career over the past few years, with a lot of different lineup changes and a couple key members leaving the band. Their original vocalist, Garrison Lee, left after their 2013 album Augment to focus on other projects. Actually, oddly enough, those other projects, I believe, were an insurance company that his dad founded. He ended up finding a good job there, so good luck to him. The primary songwriter for most of this project has been Jesse Cash. He's the guitarist and clean vocalist for the band. They released their first EP in 2009, a second EP in 2011. I've been a fan of the band since they released their first full-length album, Impulse, back in 2011. It had a little bit of auto-tuney vocals, but other than that, I really enjoy the guitar work that this band provides. They have a lot of hyper-melodic riffs and really fast passages that they like to put into their songs. And their songwriting ability is absolutely crazy. The kind of stuff they like to write is really catchy and really driving, which is really fun to listen to on a drive or even just to listen to at home for enjoyment. I would say that Drift is definitely a very different record compared to all their previous releases. It has a little bit more of a calm side to it as opposed to sticking to one style of music. I would say that ERRA would tend to go into monotonous territory if you listen to them for longer than a full album length. The guitar work usually keeps me interested, but if you listen to them for more than around 50 minutes as far as their previous releases go, you can tend to get a little bit bored. As is typical in the metalcore space, it can get pretty monotonous as far as the riffs go, but Jesse tends to keep things fresh in a lot of his songs, which is why this band is still really engaging for me after so many years. So let's go into the tracks on this album. It starts off with the first track and single of the record that first came out, called Luminess. It starts with a really cool tapping riff that repeats itself throughout most of the song. Let me just say that the guitar work on this album has been turned up yet another notch. Augment already had some pretty insane passages, but this has some even more complex work that will take me weeks to even figure out in general. Since I'm a guitar player myself, I tend to lean towards music that has really complex guitar passages, and this has plenty of them. It comes in spades. Their Moments of Clarity EP had Ian Eubanks on vocals. He had to quit the band because his voice was being worn out on tour and he needed to work on it. Something like that. I don't know the exact reason, but obviously they wished him the best of luck. Thankfully, all of the lineup changes have been on amicable terms, a good thing that a band should hold on to. They've now found a vocalist in JT Cavey. He used to be the vocalist for Texas in July. Obviously, they broke up last year, so now he can dedicate all of his time to ERRA. He has more of a mid-ranged growl as opposed to Garrison's more dynamic highs and lows. He'll hit some lows occasionally on the album, but most of the time he likes to stick with his comfortable mid-range register. I think it kind of makes sense given the amount of time he had to record the record. My guess is they probably hired him after Jesse had already written most of the songs. And as usual, Alex is always left to write all of the drum parts. He did the same for Augment and I believe for Impulse. I just want to give a lot of credit to Alex. If you ever watched Augment's teaser video kind of thing, they always talked about Alex just being able to write parts that work with the guitars really well, and that is not any kind of, there's not any kind of difference on this record as well. The drum work has always been on point. I've never had a problem with it. They've never been monotonous or annoying. So I just wanted to point that out because I feel like Jesse gets a lot of credit here, but I feel like Alex should as well since he writes all the drum parts. Another guitar perspective comment I'd like to make, they've also added another string to the register for this record. They used to use 6 strings in drop B flat tuning, and I believe most of this record is in drop G sharp tuning on a 7-string guitar. One thing I also noticed about this record is the guitar solos are a lot more, they seem to be more well thought out. and a little bit less shreddy than Augment was. They have more like stop-start kind of phrasing, which I think kind of fits the riff style of this record a little bit better. It's really great when you can really see a difference between albums. I like when bands like to go out and say come off with different vibes for each record they make instead of sticking to one style over and over, which can sometimes lead me away from a band eventually. It just depends on obviously what your interest goes into, but I do like when bands can change it up every once in a while. Because they're now signed to Sumerian Records, the production on this album has improved a lot. I really like the production job that I believe it's Nick did on this album. That was the name it was, I think. Note, if you buy this on Amazon, it comes with the digital booklet that comes with the official lyrics and everything, so that's really nice to have. Speaking of which, I should have gotten a hard copy of this album. I don't know why I didn't. This is a band that I really like a lot. They've been one of my bands that I've consistently listened to for the past few years, so good on them for that. Good on them. Jesse's vocals have improved, and that's something that's obviously just been constant throughout their albums. He's just improved with every single record. On Impulse, it sounds like he was using a little bit of pitch correction to his advantage, since his vocals are very high. He's obviously inspired by Sausen, and that's evident even more in this record. I feel like some of the vocal phrases are very similar to something that you would get from a band like Sausen. I think that's how you say the band name. That was Sausen. So instead of going in depth onto every single track, I'm just going to say that this album as a whole is something you should definitely listen to in one sitting. It's very similar to the last review I just did of Tesseract's Polaris. I'm a big fan of the album experience, and that's something that I think that this record does really well. All their other records, you can kind of pick out songs or pick out your favorites, but this one I feel like has a little bit more of a cohesive direction, which makes it worth sitting down and listening to the whole thing. I really have a hard time picking my favorite songs on this album because it is literally that good. My favorite song changes literally every day, but some of the ones that I remember the most are Orchid, Skyline, Continuum, Safe Haven, and of course Drift. That title track is really cool. I like the tempo they chose for it and everything, and some of those riffs are just really memorable. And of course the chorus is really different and has a really nice, tasteful guitar solo that's not like overplayed or anything. If you brought up each track on the album, I would be able to tell you easily one vocal passage or some guitar riff or the chorus or something like that. Something that really makes the song stick out. The whole album's good. That's what's up with this record. The entire album's good. It's ridiculously good. That kind of leads to the fact that Jesse's songwriting has just constantly been improving along with his vocal work. And the band just keeps everything really tight and put together. It sounds like the band is closer knit as well. Something I kind of worried about after the Augment days when Alan Rigdon, the second guitarist, I really liked his sense of melodic interpretation. He brought some riffs that you could easily tell whenever you were listening to the song, oh, that's Alan playing. You could obviously make a difference between Jesse and Alan's guitar work. Sean Price used to be the bassist for the band, but then he swapped to guitars, and he's been doing that since Moments of Clarity. He is also a very good guitar player, and it seems like Jesse's kind of helping him out, trying to play some, like Luminess, the tapping riff in the beginning. He's the one that plays that live throughout most of the track. I guess the only thing I could really say that this record, or that the next record I would be looking forward to would be Sean maybe putting a little bit more of his input into the songs. I checked his Instagram page out, and it looks like he's writing some pretty cool stuff too that's also melodic, so I don't see why it would be a problem having him take on some songwriting duties or whatnot. Nothing against Jesse at all, because his songs are completely unique and very cool. He has a certain style too. You can just kind of tell that he's the person writing the songs. One thing that's different about this record too is it doesn't have a dedicated like epic. Dementia was the longest song on Augment. It was around 7 minutes or so. But on this album, you get two different long tracks. Safe Haven and The Hypnotist are both around 7 minutes long, and they're right at the end of the record. They're both really good songs. The Hypnotist is more of a crazy, like dissonant kind of thing, while Safe Haven is a melodic kind of almost. It's a more melodic track, but ERRA is obviously always going to be melodic. That's how they've always done things. I noticed there isn't a song on this record that has like a diminished kind of feel. Hybrid Earth and Valbara from the two previous records were like that, but this album doesn't seem to have any of that, which I don't mind. It's kind of good to have a couple of tracks like that you can go back to, obviously, on the older records. This album, genre-wise, even though I don't like to name genres, is leaning more towards the progressive metal side instead of like the metalcore side. There aren't as many breakdowns on this album at all, which is kind of nice. And it's also dynamic enough to where I can listen to it pretty consistently without getting bored. There isn't that repeating factor of riff, breakdown, riff, breakdown, riff, breakdown. They add some like soft moments and then some super heavy parts to kind of keep the album interesting to your ears, which is nice. Track 3 is Skyline. This is one of my favorites. Starts off with a nice clean riff with Jesse singing in his lower register, which is something he employs a little more on this record, which is nice. There's still plenty of moments where he sings relatively high, so if you're not a fan of that, if you're not a fan of any of their previous records, you probably won't like this one either, but he does use his lower register a little more, which is definitely a positive point for me. I kind of like that he changes up his vocal stylings a little bit on this record too. There's just so many good things about this album. I don't even know. I could talk for like half an hour about this. Obviously, if I've listened to it like 8 times over, then it's good. JT on this album, even though he stays consistent with his mid-range vocals, I've been told that he's an absolute beast live, and he sounds really good in the studio as always. He has some YouTube covers that he had done previously of ERRA songs. If you ever wanted to check that out, you can search his name on YouTube. But it seems like since he was involved so late in the writing process that it'll probably be more of a defined effort on the next album. I've always liked ERRA's lyrics too. They're very conceptual. The one thing I would say about this album that's extremely different from their previous records is their lyrics used to be mostly about like mythology and things like that. There were some records that like hit a personal note, like Heart off of Impulse, and some other songs off of Augment, but a lot of these songs seem to have more of like a personal touch to them, like Jesse was writing based on experiences in his life, which I would say actually makes the songs a little bit more accessible to people who say have never heard of ERRA or something like that. They can kind of have some lyrics that kind of point out to them or are more relatable to most human beings. Although in some ways I feel like there should be a couple of songs maybe about mythology. I kind of liked those lyrics way back when, but that's also something that I think Garrison really liked to write about, and this is something where Jesse, I think, took most of the lyrical duties on this album, so I can totally see why that happened, but I think it's a subjective thing. The lyrics are really nice and complex. Some of them can be slightly cliche, but most of them, I would say, are actually pretty unique and very fun to read if you take a look at the booklet. The 4th song is Hourglass. It starts off with a nice, like, 3/4 riff going on. This song swaps between 3/4 and 4/4 timings consistently, which kind of keeps things interesting. I noticed that the Hypnotist does the exact same thing. I literally listen to this thing so much that I'm not going off of notes. I'm just going straight off the cuff. I'm really hoping that Drift is the album that really pushes them beyond the, I guess you could say, the niche level of popularity, where people who are just like, oh, I know ERRA because I know all these other bands that this certain genre of people know, but apparently Drift sold really well in its first week, which is really exciting, so I'm hoping that they kind of break into the mainstream a little bit, or people start listening to them a little more. I'd say this album is both more accessible, but also more technical. It's a perfect mix of both, I would say. Please, if you have time, listen to this with really good headphones and listen to the whole thing all the way through. There's nothing else I can really say about it. It's a really good, cohesive piece of work. And the album art is fantastic too. It's a change from what they used to do. I feel like a lot of their older album covers are kind of like symmetrical or something. I noticed that Sean said the same thing in a review. He's like, we changed things up a little bit for this album cover. It's cool. It's like a jellyfish with some cool blue and green like effects going on. So I like it. This album has a vibe, which makes it totally worth listening to. I feel like this album is great for summer. It's perfect for that. Between the months in like May and August, it's like a perfect time to listen to this album. It comes on. It makes you kind of feel like you're enjoying a nice metal album on a beach. But if you want to hear this album's vibe in one track, just listen to the title track. Drift is perfect for that. It goes right with the vibe of the album cover and absolutely everything else. But please go check it out. Totally worth your time. Worth around 45 minutes of your time. It's about how long this album is, I think. It's a pretty good album length. I wish it was longer, but what the heck. I just got back from a tour I went to with the Contortionists, Monuments, Entheos, and Sleep Makes Waves. They were a blast and really kind of gave me a different view on how to appreciate music in a way. Live performances are obviously a totally different beast than like a recorded project. And some people try to sound as much like the recorded project as possible, while some people just like to completely change it up and make it a little more dynamic for a live sound. And I just really appreciate that. It kind of puts more thought into the fact that you should really just appreciate music as an art form and not as something you just kind of play in the background. Obviously, everybody has different tastes and everybody takes music differently, but just kind of made me rethink that going to a concert that I haven't really enjoyed like that in a long time.
So yeah, if I keep this one a little short, it's because the Tesseract review was like extremely long, and I kind of wanted to just get everybody familiar with like who the band is and what the album's about. So like I said, it's definitely worth checking out. It's one of my favorite albums of the season. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you guys want to see any more album reviews or anything else you want me to go ahead and try out or take a listen to, let me know either in the comments or just kick me a like if you enjoyed the video. A like, a thumbs up. It used to be a like. It's not like that anymore. It ain't 2007, boys. I also kind of wanted to go over my CD collection. That might be the next video I could go over, and maybe I'll pick out some reviews from that. If you see anything in the collection that you like, let me know, and I'll go ahead and try to do a review of it, since obviously if I bought it in hard copy, it usually means I like it. So you guys are awesome. Have a great day.